Hi, today I'm going to be talking about identifying gifted and talented students in history at a secondary level. So improvements in feedback over the last 50 years have demonstrated an unmistakable disservice to the outlier. That is, the student who falls beyond the bell curve at either end of traditionally standardized testing and who will not develop as consistently as an average student. The system wasn't designed for them. While processes for gifted and talented students in Australia are developing now at a rapid rate, there is, and I quote, a lack of response and research and government inquiries that maintain the need for increased teacher training, especially at a pre-service level. So, by analysing contemporary research and cultural perceptions, I aim in this 10-minute presentation to provide you with some key tools for a graduate teacher to utilise in identifying gifted and talented students, particularly within history. So why has there been so little attention to these students in the first place? One reason could come down to the if it's not broken, why fix it syndrome. But being historically trained, one of my favourite reflections of this conversation is a simple comparison over 100 years of classroom. So this is what a classroom looked like in the 1800s. Here, you can see they're explicitly designed to create workers who can substitute themselves into whatever parts of the workforce the economy or industrial revolution demanded. Obedience and following and modelling were what was valued. As we can see, 100 years later, there's really not that much change. But it was the back end of this century that the education system really started getting a kick in the ass by both technology and concurrent evidence-based practices. Now, as in today's future or exemplary classroom, we see a much better reflection of an emergent 21st century society, one where cannery factories of Sydney's inner west are being replaced by cafes, desperately expensive real estate and dog grooming businesses. So, society is asking much more of our students, and now we must ask much more of our teachers. So what exactly is a gifted and talented student? Well, the definition can often be quite fluid depending on the discipline, the students, the test itself, or even the feelings of a student on a particular testing day. Thanks to the unyielding work of Francois Gagny, we now have developed an accepted, differentiating model of giftedness and talent. What is refreshing about this model is its emphasis on the process required, this part in the middle, and thus the role a teacher must fulfill. The key distinction here is the distinction between what is a gift and what is a talent. A student is gifted when they belong to the top 10% of a cohort in terms of their aptitudes or natural traits, natural abilities over here. While these can be born with or developed at a young age, they only catalyse into talents with an adequate developmental process. This is where we come in. Even if a student displays all of the natural abilities exceptionally, without a concerted effort in the teaching process or even in the simple identification, these students may never learn or demonstrate these skills as talents. In this sense, teachers play two crucial roles. First, in facilitating this whole transitional process, and second, in the further identification and monitoring of exceptional students. Teachers will affect the developmental process in terms of activities, specified content, investment in the student's interests, and maintaining an appropriate pace such that educational progress is sustained. Clearly, the theme throughout this process is valuing an extensive understanding of the student themselves. For knowing one's student through monitoring, dialogue, and rapport, an educator can most effectively track their progress and reduce the chance for underachievement. Underachievement is defined by the gap between the possible achievement goals of a gifted individual given a supported development versus the actual goals that individual received or achieved. There can be a myriad of reasons for this discrepancy, yet a teacher can assist in combating two major issues which commonly plague gifted students. First are the social pressures placed on students whose giftedness often lead to a unique vulnerability of bullying, as about 67% of students in Year 8 have said that they experience bullying within their schooling. So maintaining a rapport with a gifted individual and having an understanding of the social dynamic surrounding them will give you the perceptive tools to decode that student's interpersonal feelings, confidence, and unlock their potential. Secondly, a gifted student will underachieve if they are never identified or if they are never effectively challenged to push themselves further by their educator. So, What is gifted in history? What does it look like, and what are some aptitudes that make for a good historian? To describe some of these dimensions, let me start with an example of one of my favourite historians, Howard Zinn. At Thomas Jefferson High School, which Howard describes as the slums of Brooklyn, Zinn was unable to engage in the structure or numeracy aspects of school, becoming a shipyard assistant at the age of 18. Luckily, Zinn benefited from the astute interest of his parents, who at an early age pulled their money to acquire a New York Times subscription and saturate Howard's appetite for reading. Additionally, the newly assigned principal to his school, a poet named Elias Lieberman, noticed Howard's keen oral and literacy skills. He established a creative writing social club where investigative journalistic research informed collaborative and individual projects, which began Zinn's extracurricular learning. So many students' story would end with struggling to engage in school. Yet in identifying Howard's interests and aptitudes, his parents and principal created an environment where his talents could grow. So let's use Howard to identify some specific aptitudes and abilities which can be developed into a high-achieving historian. So here are some commonly attributed aptitudes which indicate giftedness at a young age. Essentially, the earlier parents and teachers can identify these characteristics, the earlier a teacher can provide them with the necessary provisions and plans to develop that student. For Zinn, his contemporaries identified excellence and individuality in his language development, his vocabulary, his ability to ask reflective and probing questions, early development of classifying and investigating skills. The fact Howard struggled in school examples the individuality of giftedness and specifically within history. For many students like Howard, these aptitudes aren't necessarily overt or comprehensive, but due to effective identification from his peers, Zinn's unique sets of gifts developed him into a world-class historian, going on to write a groundbreaking and controversial people's history of the United States that resulted in the rewriting of most national textbooks. Identification is an ongoing process of feedback. Educators should remain vigilant, as often many gifted aptitudes are enveloped or hidden within social interaction or individual characteristics. Objective testing is an excellent descriptor of possible aptitudes present within a cohort of students. Variability, however, is completely dependent on the test itself, where some forms of testing may be culturally or cognitively advantageous to a select group of students. It is impossible for a student to score beyond their true ability, and this integral characteristic is why in many cases this is favoured more in secondary schooling. The psychometric assessment, or IQ testing, is arguably the oldest form of gifted education in existence, about 100 years old. Resulting in a number often between 65 and 145, the IQ test rewards pattern recognition and working memory, generally indicating whether a student has the potential to achieve well in school. Here's an example of a question. Recognizing themes and remembering patterns is a highly gifted aptitude within history, and with successful grooming can inform a high level of creativity in terms of work production and analysis. Importantly, the common IQ tests today have been designed and redesigned to remain as culturally neutral as possible. Further, its success can be attributed to its age, for a vast quantity of data and statistics can be incorporated to give predictions of future development. In this way, although it is highly informing for some students, not all gifted students will achieve a naturally high IQ, and thus this method should be used in conjunction with other objective and subjective methods. While parent nomination is invaluable for earlier stages of development, the subjective process of teacher nomination, this is an example here, can be highly effective to both identify and inform students, to inform further investigation of potentially gifted students. This is an example of a teacher nomination where this particular student, William, is analysed for both positive and negative GAT behaviours. Although it doesn't show up here, there were 1 positive behaviour selected and 10 negative behaviour also selected. So this has ended up summed in the conclusion. William is displaying a majority of negative behaviours and should be further considered using other identification tools. It's highly important there that just because a student only shows the negative behaviours also may mean that they could be a gifted and talented student. For just like the forced choice dilemma, students are often confronted with a choice, particularly at this age. So dependent on the subjects, teachers can screen for natural abilities more specifically and in a variety of contexts. I.e., a gym teacher may observe a student in the playground, or a history teacher may observe in an English classroom, or even in extracurricular debating, for example. Put simply, we must not perform another disservice upon the future of Australia and allow exceptional students to fall through the cracks without adequate investment that a traditionally mainstream student will receive. It is stereotypical for a history teacher to be led off topic by interested students. While this is usually considered to deviate from the all-important delivery of content, I stand to advertise its simplicity and beauty and exceptional usefulness. Affording a class, a group of students, or an individual this reciprocal dialogue creates an atmosphere where teacher and students become a vehicle for inquiry rather than a lecture theatre. Thank you very much.